Hey everyone, it's Rob Stanley with the FBA podcast. And today I've got Tim Jordan from Private Label Legion. Hey Tim, thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for putting all this together.
Not a problem. So we're going to actually cover a variety of questions that have come up from different sellers and try to answer them the best we can and give some people some advice on different things regarding kind of this Amazon selling. But one of the first things that keeps coming up is about Chinese sellers and whether they're kind of good for the Amazon industry or are they bad for us? I mean, I think everybody's got an opinion, and I know we wanted to jump right into this. So Tim, what's your opinion on Chinese sellers selling on Amazon?
Yeah, and let me start off by saying I think this is a hot topic recently for many reasons. One is the recent FBA shipping restrictions.
Yeah,
I remember that happened. There was a lot of headlines coming out saying, oh, this stinks for us. We can't ship our stuff in. But for all those black hat Chinese sellers that are shipping straight from China to FBA, like they're held up too. So this is a good opportunity. With the new releases that just came out, or the new headlines that just came out about Amazon potentially doing the video verification. We can talk about that more later for new seller accounts. And I just keep seeing this, it's like this weird dichotomy of the Chinese sellers are the bad guys, but we have to use Chinese producers to source our goods. And they're oftentimes the same thing.
Yeah.
So let me give you kind of my opinion. I think that there's not necessarily a right or there's not necessarily a wrong geographical seller. Chinese sellers aren't bad, but Romanian sellers are good. It doesn't work that way. I think there's good sellers and there's bad sellers, right? And I think that there are bad sellers in the US, there's bad sellers in the UK, and there's great sellers in China. But let me back up a second and explain why I don't think there's ever a situation where Amazon's going to kick Chinese sellers off the platform, right? And that goes back to what Amazon is. When Jeff Bezos created this, he created this environment of this Amazon flywheel, right? And there are certain things that have to be put into this blender. And the more things you put into them, the bigger it spins and the bigger. So think of it like a hurricane, right? Think of this flywheel like a hurricane. You've got a small storm, but when you inject more hot, warm air and more hot, warm air and more moisture and more heat, the thing is just bigger and bigger and bigger. And those, humidity and the heat and those things that feed a hurricane on the Amazon flywheel, they're things like more customers, things like more products, things like lower price point, better customer service. And if you miss one of those items, you miss the whole thing becoming cyclical. So one of the things two of the things that I mentioned are low price and more products, all right, a larger catalog. And to be honest, Chinese sellers create a good environment to add both of those things, okay?
Yeah.
Chinese sellers will oftentimes drive the price down, and they will oftentimes flood Amazon with new products and a lot of variations of the same products. Now, is that necessarily a good thing for me as a seller? No, it means that the products that I would sell that are competitive are going to be more competitive. I'm going to lose some margin. I'm going to have more similar listings trying to sell, products into the same keywords that I'm focusing on. But think about this. If those two things weren't being injected into Amazon, new products, lower prices, there would be less sellers. So it would be less of a potential environment for us to sell more, right? So we kind of have to take the good and the bad with Amazon. We have to have some of those things that on the surface level we don't like. But if we didn't have those things, the Amazon engine wouldn't be as big as it is right now, right? So I'm not one of those people that definitely says, hey, we need to knock all Chinese sellers off. I don't believe that that's the answer. Not saying it's right or wrong, but because it'll never happen. It's not going to happen. They give so much to the Amazon environment and the way that it's built now for the consumer. Because remember, the client is the buyer, the shopper on Amazon. They're the most important thing, right? We know that. And without them, we wouldn't have a job. We wouldn't have a platform to sell on. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Now, when it comes to Amazon restricting things, making it more difficult for illegitimate sellers to sell, that's a wonderful thing. We definitely need to clean up. And there's a lot of complaints about Amazon. Hey, they should do more to clean this up. But, well, it's great to say that. It's also great to say, well, someone should solve world hunger. Well, obviously it's great to say that, but doing it is actually extremely difficult, right? Yeah. So I think that Amazon doing these videos, these video interviews, I'm not sure what they're going to ask. And they have to be very careful because there's certain things they can and can't ask, and they could get lawsuits for stereotyping or for having some sort of, prejudice or something like that. So they'll have to figure out how to navigate those waters. But the good thing is, one, we should get these illegitimate sellers that throw up accounts real quick, sell a bunch of black hat counterfeit stuff and jump off. I think we'll stop that. But I also think that if they put in this extra layer of security, they can back off on some other things that are causing problems for legitimate sellers. All right. Some of those things, like we're required to upload an invoice, we're required to do this and this and that. They shut our listings down or even our accounts down for more verification. And a lot of that happens retroactively, like after we've started selling, after we've got our account running. So it's a giant pain in the tail because we've already got some momentum. So I think, I'm just speculating, but I think that if they do a little bit more upfront work, like a little more verification validation at the beginning, then maybe they won't have to do so much later once we get rolling. So I think it's wonderful, and I hope they go through with it, and I hope it turns out to be a raging success.
Yeah, and one of the things you can do as a seller on Amazon too is check with your factory. Ask them if they sell on Amazon, or when you're potentially looking at a factory you're going to use even. That's one thing I did in the past when I was I was physically over in China at the factories, and we'd be in the showrooms, and we just ask them, like, are you selling this on Amazon? And they would tell us yes or no. And sometimes we would look at it, at first we kind of looked at it and we're kind of like, whoa, hey, wait, we're going to compete against you. But then what you find out is a lot of times they have a product that they've set aside that they specifically sell on Amazon, and they'll make another variation of it, which actually worked out into our favor because we looked at it and said, hey, we want to make changes XYZ to it and make our own product, off of it to sell on Amazon. And we found that actually we would outperform them. Now, could they still jump on and start selling it? Yeah, possibly. I mean, that can happen, but we found it as an advantage that we could look at the product. We could actually go look it up while we were there, see how their sales were, how they were doing on it, and see what people were saying about it. And then we could turn around and make like a better variation of it and sell it ourselves, through, and still using that same factory. So you can definitely, there's ways to kind of use that to your advantage. The other thing I want to point out, even though it's a little off topic, on eBay, one of the advantages sellers used to have from China on eBay was when they would ship directly and they were getting all these advantages through the US Postal Service for better rates than we are. Well, that's coming to an end. I've already read a lot about it, and I know that necessarily won't help the Amazon people, but it still will help as far as any the factories that were shipping directly to customers, maybe even like AliExpress and stuff like that. I think we might see shipping rates go up on that a little bit. So I want to point that out. Now, on the video verification we're talking about, kind of what do you think that they may expect? I know we're kind of speculating right now, but what do you think they might ask for? Like maybe they ask them to hold up an ID that looks like them, or a passport or something. What do you think on that, Tim?
I don't know. And I think that some of those requirements are going to be different based on where that seller is, right? But here's what I think. I think that it's almost like a placebo, right? If Amazon says, hey, we're going to start doing these video verifications, I think that a lot of the biggest troublemakers won't even try, right? Because if I know that I'm completely illegitimate, I don't have a good idea, and I don't even know what they're going to ask me, I might not get on there and even attempt it. So it may actually scare people away, before they even have to do the verification. So when I say placebo, it might not actually be like a definitive thing they can check and make sure you're verified. But it's kind of like when you're coming through customs. Like when I fly out of the country and I'm flying back in, I come through the customs. They've got my ID, but they always ask me, where have you been? What have you done? Or have you been gone for business or pleasure? They don't really care if you've been gone for business or pleasure. All they're doing is engaging with you to figure out, hey, does this guy look super nervous? Like, does he, it's kind of like the sniff test, right? I think that people can usually get a pretty good gut instinct on an initial conversation. And that Customs and Border Patrol agent, that's all they do, is they're looking for abnormalities. They're looking for a weird situation. They're looking for someone that looks scared to death. They're looking for someone that, is exhibiting these signs of guilt based on nervousness and stress and like all these things. So I think that there might not be a specific list of questions, but by announcing, hey, we're going to do these video verifications, it will scare a lot of the bad players off. But then I think that also the people that are going to do the video verifications are just going to ask normal everyday questions. And if you completely act like you're guilty, they might then initiate a second deeper layer of checking or investigation or verification, something like that.
Yeah, I think
that's how I would do it,
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago coming back from Italy, and the lady asked me, well, what do you like to do for fun? And I was like, golf. And she's all, what's the brand of your golf clubs? I'm all, how random is that, right? Like, I'm all, really? And I'm like, Mizuno? And she kind of just moved on, right? I think she was, looking for, I think, that shock factor. And maybe that's what they're trying to do, right?
I
It's like,
agree.
how many people are going to avoid it? So, I mean, how do you think how do you think this might affect the Chinese seller? Do you think we could see a decrease in Chinese sellers? I mean, personally, I think by verifying, if you're a good, legitimate company and you're selling good products, what do you care? I mean, you're good with this, but kind of what's your thought on how that might affect how many Chinese sellers we might see exit Amazon selling platform?
Well, I don't think that it's going to cause Chinese sellers to exit the platform or not be able to, upload on the platform. But I think that it's going to eliminate a lot of the illicit sellers, which also happen to, a lot of them happen to be Chinese, right? So I don't want to stereotype and say, oh, Chinese sellers bad. That's not my point. But I think that it will eliminate a lot of the bad actors. And right now we know a lot of the bad actors are coming from China. And not say they're bad people, not say they're criminals, but the way that they operate is a little bit counterintuitive to like the way Western business works, right? So they're going to throw up accounts, sell counterfeit products as fast as they can, do 4-week shipping time, and the account will be closed by the time the product gets there and we can prove that it was, black market or counterfeit, right? That's just the way they're operating. We know that a lot of them are coming out of specifically China. So we also know that there's a lot of bad players in the US and Europe and South America, Africa, everywhere, all over the world. So I think that it's going to clean up a lot of the problems, which are not specific to one person, but I think it's going to significantly impact a lot of Chinese sellers. I'll just say that.
Yeah. And do you think by them doing this video verification that maybe it'll help kind of relax Amazon on some of the other issues that people are getting suspended for?
I do, because remember, Amazon has a responsibility to its platform, to its clients, to make sure that the products are good. I remember the first really big case of counterfeit products that came out was maybe 2016. It was Birkenstock sandals, right? And Birkenstock said, fine, we're not selling our stuff on Amazon because 3/4 of the Birkenstocks on Amazon are fake. And Amazon is like, oh, well, how do we fix this, So Amazon has to react because they have a responsibility to their sellers, to their buyers, to their clients, their, shareholders. So as long as they're getting the job done, I don't think that they're going to go through extra efforts to make it more difficult for us. So if we can do these video verifications and it works, then maybe they can let loose a little bit on the range from some of those other things, like the uploading invoices, like the, utility bills and like all that stuff. That's extremely difficult to come up with sometimes.
And Tim, have you ever been the target of getting a false suspension or any issues like that with Amazon by any chance?
I've had a lot of hijackers on my listings. I have been suspended, but it wasn't due to any other issue except my own screw up. I was completely legitimately suspended. It was a nightmare. I was early on. I was doing a lot of volume, and I made a really dumb mistake, and I ended up selling a counterfeit product. I didn't know what I was doing. It was completely naive. It wasn't something that I was intentionally doing, but I got my butt suspended, and it was a really, really big problem. But, usually the hijackers come on the really, really high volume products, and I just don't sell super high volume products. I like to have a lot of products with lower volume that kind of fly under the radar. So kind of like Kevin King says the same thing, like he's never had a problem because the stuff that he sells is kind of flying under the radar. So more listings, but less volume per listing. Yeah.
And what about just kind of the opposite of that? Have you ever had to deal with somebody either say you said hijacking, but maybe they duplicated your images or they took your logo or, something along that line? Or have you heard of somebody having something like that? How they deal with it?
I've had some images stolen. Like I've seen some of my images on Pinterest, or I've seen some of my images on Alibaba. I've definitely seen that.
Yeah.
And that's not something that like this video verification is gonna squash. That's kind of outside the realm of Amazon. It's just gonna happen. But generally speaking, people are, I won't say people in general, but a lot of people are scared to death of hijackers and counterfeiters and IP thieves. There are protections, all right? And it might be a short-term, really sucky period, waiting for that test sample to come in, that test purchase, you could prove that it's counterfeit. But generally, all this stuff is fixable. I tell people all the time, don't let these things scare you away from selling on Amazon because there are protections in place. You just have to know how to initiate those protections, how to get some coverage, protect your butt, and have a little bit of patience for it to work itself out. But I don't know anybody who has ever suspended or had an IP issue or something that was legitimate that couldn't get it resolved. Now, of course, there's people that say, oh, I got suspended, I didn't do anything, and they wouldn't even listen to me. Well, it's kind of like all the people in jail that said, I didn't do it, right? So there are people that claim they're innocent, but I've never actually physically seen anybody that was actually innocent that stayed suspended or had their listing permanently revoked or something like that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is like you were saying, it's a mistake, right? They made a mistake. They just need to own up to it, fix it, and usually Amazon's if it's like a first time you've done it, they're usually pretty lenient. They'll usually get you back going once you've kind of fixed whatever it is. The other thing I suggest too is if you're looking at products to bring into the United States or have made, do a little research on it first. While you're waiting for that sample to come in, it's not that hard to get on and do some research on the product and look. I mean, when I would go over to China, we would go, 15, 20 factories in a week. And it's like, one of the things we did is we'd put this list together of all these things we wanted to buy on the airplane ride back. And then when I get back, I would start researching is there any trademark infringement? Is there any patent infringements? Like I could do most of the research. I'm not saying I'm a lawyer in any way, shape, or form, and you should use one, but I would kind of do like a first level research of the products and just kind of see. And we found things that we were just like, oh yeah, there's the trademark on it, boom, or hey, there's the patent on it, boom. And then of course, before we dive even deeper in, we would have, a lawyer basically take a look and do a deeper research on it before we'd bring it in and actually commit a lot of money to buying it. So that's something that you could kind of do yourself as at least that first round. But again, always consult with a lawyer when you absolutely are going to make a big purchase like that and you're not sure. So, one of the things also I wanted to ask you, Tim, was before we talk a little bit about your background and what's going on is you just got off a call, actually, a video chat with Danny, and you guys were talking about failed products, and I was actually on there watching, and I was just cracking up. So you guys are absolutely hilarious. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about a failed product you had and how you maybe learned from it, and how maybe others could learn from that also.
Yeah, let me find one. So here's a here's a
Wait,
product.
you acted like you had a whole bunch of them sitting there.
Dude, I do. I've got products here. This is a thing that creates like noodles out of zucchini. Whoever eats zucchini noodles is crazy. I've got some crappy Moscow Mule mugs. I've got products laying all over. But let's talk about my meat tenderizer. All right.
Meat tenderizer. All right, go for it.
So this is one of those products that I actually started copying. I was looking at this. There's a product. It's a name brand one of these that has these blades that are underneath this guard, right? And when you retract this, it pokes
the blades
your meat.
Come out.
So you basically put it on like your steak and pump it up and down, and it will poke holes into your chicken breast or whatever and tenderize it. And I started selling these, just a very generic product, like maybe 2016. And there's 56 very sharp blades on this thing. All right.
Yeah.
Like very sharp stainless steel. Look at that. Crazy.
Yeah. Little razors.
Yeah. So to make this thing safe, this top twists. Okay. So it locks. So unlocked, locked.
Twist it and locks. Like
it's good. And I was not doing very good job on my inspections. I was having, 20% of my product inspected and allowing for a 1%, fail rate in the inspections. All good. Well, I should have gotten all of them inspected because I got a review and an email from a client once that thought they were going to pull a prank on their mom, right? So the way the prank works was they would have it unlocked and you've got these spikes sticking out and he's, puncturing the meat and then she doesn't realize it, but he clicks the lock on and just turns around and sticks it right on her arm. Like just pushes hard, so wham, just hits on her arm. And the objective was to make her freak out thinking she could get stabbed, but she'd be safe. Yeah. Well, the lock mechanism was broke.
Oh.
So he's doing the meat on the counter, clicks the lock, turns around, just rams it right into her shoulder, and the lock didn't work. So he literally punched 56 perfect little holes into her arm.
Oh.
And they're all probably a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch deep.
No way.
And they've got like chicken blood on them or something, So now we're thinking like it was a disaster. He sent me a picture of her arm and she had a perfect square with all these little holes jabbed in, right? Not good. So moral of the story, and luckily I didn't get sued, nothing like that. Like I got off really, really lucky because I was kind of in the cowboy days when nobody had liability insurance. You know, it's like 2016. Yeah. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just freaking going for it, and could have had my butt for sure. But I had to recall all the units. I physically tested all of them, and the ones that were good, I shipped them back in. And then I started shopping for an insurance company. So, you know, there's definitely some war stories out there, some issues, but I feel like if you haven't made a mistake at least once, you're not trying hard enough. Right? Don't make that mistake. Don't screw up with a sharp project that stabs somebody and say, "Oh, Tim said it was okay." But like, if I hadn't made those mistakes, I wouldn't have learned along the way and gotten better.
And you would think 20%, checking 20% of your inventory would have probably at least caught that. I mean, obviously not.
It just one, and it just happened to be the one that some dude was gonna psych out his mom and stab her in the arm.
So Tim, how did you change in the sense of like, let's talk about, doing testing on your products now? Are you testing 100%, 50%? What did you change?
It depends on the product. You know, there's if you haven't seen Project X, which is the case study I did with Helium-10, go to YouTube and check out Project X Helium-10. You'll find it. This is one of the products that we sold. It's wood. It's pretty indestructible. It's pretty basic. On these, a 20% test is fine. Right? Because what could possibly be wrong with them? You know, they're surely something. That's why we're getting inspected. But 20% is fine. But for something that, like the meat tenderizer, that's dangerous, we would definitely want to get this tested. If I was selling a drink dispenser or a fish aquarium, I don't want to put water in all of them. Because if I put water in all of them, they've all got to dry out. I've got to repackage all of them. Someone's going to say, "Oh, this is used," if there's a little moisture. So I have to think like, do I want, and I don't even want to, if I have 5,000 fish aquariums, I don't want to test 20% of them. So I think what we do is we get a couple tested very, very well. And based on those tests, we'd set some specifications. Is this caulk joint completely patent, all the way across this seam? Is this valve assembled correctly? Does it have the appropriate O-ring? And then we could take those things into visual tests and then check 20 or 30 or 50% of those items of those products to make sure that caulk line, that sealant is done, to make sure that the O-ring is intact, to make sure that the spigot's tight enough on this drink dispenser, right? So there's not like a wrong or right answer, but what I feel, one of the best things I did, started using a legitimate inspection company that knows this stuff, and a lot of times they have suggestions I didn't think about. Lately, I've been using Movely, right, and recommending Movely, and Movely has a really, really extensive list of things that they do, and a lot of things that I'd never even think about. So make sure you have a good inspector. But I think the answer of, do we do 100%, 20%, 50%, 10%? I think it just depends on the product.
Yeah. So anybody who's listening, Movely, Sujug, we've had him on the podcast. You can go back and listen to his. Ashlyn Haddon Insurance for product liability insurance. Absolutely recommend her. I'm sure there's others out there. She's been on our podcast. You can go back and listen to that also. I mean, there's some great tips here that Tim's given. And, if you want to continue to get tips like this, let's talk about your Facebook group, Private Label Legion, and where people can post questions, or if they have questions about liability insurance or things like that. I know I've been on there and answered a few. But why don't you tell them a little bit about kind of what got you started on that Private Label Legion, and, where is it at now, and what do you got kind of coming up for it?
Yeah. So I didn't start this business to be a guru, and I wasn't trying to build an audience. But I just started getting asked to be on a lot of different, podcasts and YouTube channels and things like that, just to give information. And I realized at one point, hey, there's a lot of people that want this information. And the truth is, I go against the grain a little bit. Like, I preach stuff that is not mainstream, right? And I think there's a valid reason for that. There's a valid point. So I wanted my own spot where I could kind of get on my soapbox occasionally and talk about stuff the way that I wanted to. So I created this Facebook group along with the entire community and the theme, the Private Label Legion. So imagine like the Roman army theme. I feel like we're all like in this battle together, marching towards e-com dominance, or marching towards financial freedom, or marching towards just an extra, car payment a month, selling a few RA items. It doesn't matter. Everybody's, the definition of the end of their journey is all different, but we're all kind of marching together. So I've started doing meetups. When this COVID stuff is over, we can all get back together again. We'll do those things. We've got free Facebook group, like I said, Private Label Legion. I've got a podcast, Legion Radio. Got a YouTube channel. Just look me up, Tim Jordan, Private Label Legion. Got all sorts of content, but we try to keep the fluff out of it. It's not spammy. just try to have good content and a good place for people to come and get resources, information, and collaborate with each other.
Yeah, that's great. What you also just give kind of a brief background at how did you get into selling on Amazon, and give everybody kind of a backstory on what you were doing prior to it also.
It was kind of by accident. I was a full-time firefighter and EMT for about 10 years. And all firefighters, we have crazy schedules. So we all work part-time jobs. And I would work a schedule where I would be on shift for 24 hours and off for 48. So most weeks I only worked 2 days. So I had a construction company and a masonry company, and I did all sorts of stuff. But I got involved with a buddy in a business that was a sourcing agent. I was basically a procurement agent and logistics agent for a government contractor. So have you seen the movie War Dogs, the two guys that are like selling guns in the Middle East? That was me, but not weapons. Yeah, I was selling diesel generators and dump truck tires and blast doors and protein bars, right? So I would source all this stuff for the State Department, and it would get shipped around to consulates and embassies and contractor bases in the Middle East and all sorts of crazy stuff. So I started traveling the world, getting connected with people, and we got a lot of wholesale accounts. And one day I started looking at these wholesale accounts, and I could buy a product for $3 that was selling on Amazon for 19. And I thought, well, this is crazy. I didn't know you could sell on Amazon, but I thought, surely I can sell this on eBay. So I literally put a Craigslist ad out. I'm looking for someone that can teach me to sell on eBay. I have wholesale accounts. I think I have good pricing, willing to pay somebody. So this dude shows up after we emailed a couple of times. I expected like some 22-year-old college kid. He was like this 60-year-old bald guy. He walks in, he looks at my catalog. He's like, you don't need to sell on eBay. You need to sell on Amazon. I'm like, you can sell on Amazon? He's like, yeah, you can sell on Amazon. And that first year, well, like by month 7, we'd done over $1 million in sales profitably, right? And that was a combination of wholesale and private label products. On that call that you saw with Danny McMillan, I was showing you some of those products I sold, trucking chains and golf cart accessories and toys and all sorts of crazy stuff. And I was just using the contacts I had already in China and my shipping contacts, you know, because I built that up through the State Department gig, all while I'm working as a firefighter, right? Yeah. So things escalated. I got pretty good at the branding. I've exited out of a couple different Amazon businesses and accounts and brands, and just keep going. So everything that I learn, I love to network. I love to hear stories. I love to meet new people, learn different methods. So everything that I learned is just kind of turning into content, and I'm still selling online. I have a coaching program called the Centurion League, which is it's growing at a pretty good rate right now. Basically, I don't have a course. Not to say there's anything wrong with courses. I don't like that format for me because things change, and I like the interaction. There's a lot of courses out there. So I tell people, hey, go watch Project X on YouTube, take the Freedom Ticket course that Helium 10 and Kevin King have, and then join our Centurion League coaching program, which is 2 live Zoom calls a week. So basically we get in there and have a conversation. Imagine you're at a conference sitting around a table with a bunch of strangers. You're just talking and working. And we have people that share their products, and we all pick it apart. And we have people that share their journeys, and we have people that ask questions. And a question you ask me, this person didn't even know to ask, but now they've learned it. So that live interaction. Then we have a private Facebook group for that. And we have a members only site where all of our coaching sessions are actually put on it. So we have like probably a couple hundred hours of content that the moment you sign up, you can go join that, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, that's great. And I really appreciate you sharing all that information. Okay, before we let Tim go, and you guys want to hear this, Tim, tell them the experience you had one time when you're on an airplane and how your firefighting skills came in handy.
I forgot about that. Yeah. I've, being an EMT, and I'm not practicing anymore, but it doesn't mean that I don't have the knowledge and the experience, being an EMT. And just a couple months ago, I was flying back from, I think, San Francisco somewhere, and I was on a plane, and, you occasionally will hear the flight attendants call, if there's someone with any medical experience, please hit your call button. And I've even heard that on like long international calls, and you hear ding, 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 ding. Like everybody and their mama is a medical expert on an airplane, So I didn't press the button. I was just a lowly EMT, right? And I figured there's got to be 16 surgeons on this plane, so that are more qualified than me. So I'm sitting in the last row of first class, and we were coming back from Vegas. That's what it was. And from Vegas to Dallas. And I just kind of ignored it. But then I see the flight attendants running up and down the aisles. And I noticed they're all running up to the front row of first class, and there's something going on. And by the sheer panic in their face, I thought someone is choking or their heart has stopped. Like it's go time. So I remember they just served me my breakfast, and I was like, oh, can't eat now. So I hand my break. And I get up, and this lady was like having some full, neuro episode. It's crazy. Everything was going crazy. Her heart rate was like 180, and she had no oxygen in her system to speak of. But turns out I was the most qualified medical person on the plane. Crap. Now it's got to be me. So we started broke. It was cool. Like, I always wondered what they keep on an airplane for medical devices. And they actually have a lot of stuff. Like, they have some really good equipment, and there's some stuff that's missing. So they have injectable insulin, but they don't have a glucometer, which measures blood sugar.
Wow.
If you don't know someone's blood sugar, and if you don't know what type of diabetic they are, if you give them insulin, you can kill them.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, you've got insulin, and you've got, like, in a situation where there's no doctors on the plane, someone would just stick this person with insulin. Like, it's the Wild West, at 30,000 feet, apparently, with a medical bag. But we got her calmed down. We got O2 oxygen given to her, and we got everything stabilized. Had to make an emergency landing and pass her off to paramedics on the ground. But I don't want to have to do that again. That's kind of scary when you're at 30,000 feet, and, like, I don't have a heart monitor or anything, so I don't know what's going on. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
It's not pretty. I'll tell you that.
Well, let me tell you, I really appreciate you being on the podcast, Tim. I love hanging out with Tim. Him and I always have a good time when we're together, and he always has great stories. And be sure to check out his Facebook page, and I will give that again. That's Private Label Legion on Facebook. And you can get a hold of Tim like a million different ways. He's always available, or heck, just check out a video. He's usually on it. So he's on everybody's videos all the time. So Tim, I really appreciate it. We've been trying to get you on for months, and I'm finally glad we got you on the podcast.
Yep.
Thanks for being on.
All right, man. Take care.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and for more information, please visit FeedbackWhiz.com.